So we've got our 1976 2.7 liter case back from the machine shop, along with the crank, heads, and assorted other pieces. We're just going to go ahead and get this on the stand and start doing our cleaning preps and measurement preps for getting it all back together. So on this case, it's been line bored. It's also had all the time certs already done for us, so we don't have to do this on this one. It's also had the barrel surfaces have been remachined, and although it's been cleaned at the machine shop, it's still not assembly clean. We've still got to go through, flush all of the oil galleys, and just take some quick measurements, make sure everything's where it needs to be. We've also got our crank. This one was machined 10 under, both rods and mains. We'll recheck those just before we go ahead and order bearings. So I'm just going to verify our crank measurements. This should have been cut 10 under, which is 0.25 of a millimeter, which is pretty much what it looks like, 56.728. A stock reading would be 56.978, somewhere around there. So I'll verify the specs in the handbook in just a minute, but right now it certainly looks like 0.25 under. Yes. All right, that is 51.712, which is also going to be 0.25 under. And let's just check a couple of these other ones. So the only available bearing from these in oversize is factory Porsche. And I'm just going to lay a couple in to check my intermediate shaft backlash. Got to put my dial gauge on it and measure it now. So our clearance needs to be between 0.29 and 0.49, and we're right there, probably 0.35, somewhere pretty close to that. So we've got all of our parts for the lower end of our 2.7 liter 911 engine laid out. We've got crank that's been machined, we've got our connecting rods that have been overhauled and balanced, intermediate shaft and pistons and cylinders sitting over there in the new Marley boxes. So we're going to get ready to start putting this engine back together. So when I squirt in here to flush, see I got fluid coming out here and out over here. So these sets of journals are all connected. So I've got my oil pump and new intermediate shaft installed. I checked the intermediate shaft, made sure it would sit in before I installed any of the oil pump. Also made sure that when I rotated the crank that the intermediate shaft wasn't too tight against the gear. Everything felt nice and smooth there. So I've put my rod holders back on. Got my timing chain holder, which is just going to hold the chain up, and I'm about ready to apply my Loctite 574 to the other case half. I've also got my case through bolts all prepped, ready to go, so as soon as I get the case down on it, I can tighten everything down and make sure that we get a good seal and everything still rotates nice and smoothly. There we go. So I've got the 2.7 crank and case all closed. I've also put in my timing chain guides on both sides, so they're all now supported. I've got connecting rods supported on our elastic bands just to help it, so I can roll it over, make sure it's nice and smooth, which it is. You can literally one finger just roll that over. Then thermostat's in, it was tested, everything looking good there. Now we're waiting for a couple of things to come back from the platers. Studs up here that are getting replated in yellow zinc, a couple of studs in the front that are not a big deal. But what I'm doing now is I'm getting ready to unbox and put on the pistons and cylinders. So we've got 6 brand new Marley piston and cylinder assemblies. Now these all need to be unpackaged, disassembled, the wrist pin comes out. We need to make sure we grab our 2 wrist pin circlips. It'll be in the little bag, but I also have to pop these out and clean and orientate all of our piston rings, so they're not ready to install just yet. The other thing that I'm doing as well is I'm kind of assembling some pieces. Now, not all of this stuff was done by us. The rockers were refinished by another company, and so were the rocker shafts. And a couple of things I'm running into, like this one, for example, screwing in the new elephant's foot adjuster, and it goes in about 2 threads, and there's a big old gall in there. So I need to go through and clean that up. The other issue that I'm having is there's new bushings being installed in these rockers, and with our shafts, they just do not want to go in. So I need to measure the shaft, see if the shaft's all just belled out here and worn out, in which case we'll be replacing some of these shafts. And I also need to pin fit the rockers and make sure they've been sized correctly. This is the kind of stuff that you always need to check whenever you send out work. You can't always guarantee that it's going to be 100% when you get it back. So this is how the piston came out. You can see our compression rings perfectly aligned and our oil ring almost in alignment. So this is the other reason why you can't just push the piston down a little bit and try and connect a circlip and a pin through there and use them as is. Always want to make sure you can clean them. These are pretty sticky too. So I'm just going to clean this down with brake clean, lubricate it with oil, and position our rings. So I've got my piston that I've brake cleaned. I've already installed the first circlip ring and made sure it's located. I've also set my piston ring gaps so they're all separated out. All I'm going to do is lubricate now and install this piston on and set this barrel. So when I lubricate, I'm just going to push these up. Rotate that to get oil through everything. Then I want to hit some oil in my wrist pin. We want to make sure that our lump is orientated on the right side. I'm going to use my circlip or wrist pin circlip injector. These are a really neat idea. Make it really simple. I've got the circlip installed, and all you have to do is locate the circlip, and then you press on that injector until it snaps into place. Make sure it's seated, and that is it. I'll just grab a pick and we'll make sure it rotates. So you want to make sure you got that circlip at the top, and one of the best ways to tell is if it's installed correctly is if you move it slightly. You don't have to move it much, and it should slide in the bore, which is what this one's doing. It just snaps right in there. So we've wrapped up a lot on our 2.7 liter engine today. We've got both sets of heads on, cam boxes on, camshafts are in, just finished setting the camshaft timing, did chain depths shortly before that, so everything's moving right along. We should have this pretty well all closed up in the next day or so, as far as the long block is concerned, all the rockers in and exhaust on. The intake system is going to take a little bit more work because of the CIS, and we'll go into a lot more depth on that when we get to it. Okay, so we're going to check our hot start. We've had the engine sitting for about 20 minutes now. Okay, so our engine started right up, didn't need any throttle, which it shouldn't do if all your settings are correct. And I was just able to press the start button and it pretty much cranked a couple of times and fired right up, exactly what I want it to do. So we've let our engine sit overnight, and the last thing I want to do is check my cold start in the morning. My hot start was good. I've removed my fuel pressure gauges. I've put the air filter on. And so let's go ahead and start it up.